A few weeks ago, I said that I would be making your RPG game. The only problem with that is that I need to get the combat from looking like this to looking like this. There's only one problem. Making RPG games is probably one of the hardest things to do on Roblox. Luckily for me, I've actually already made an RPG game that I totally finished. Okay, maybe I didn't actually finish it, but what this means is I actually have a good base of what makes a good RPG game and what doesn't. And arguably the most important part of an RPG game is its combat. The game needs to feel satisfying and really fun to beat up enemies. Although this isn't a Roblox game, I think that one of the best combat systems ever made was actually For Honor's combat system. They built this really fancy system where basically they had a left, right, or top position, where while you were fighting it was like a mini game where you're trying to change your stance to be able to hit the enemy successfully. They also then built in some blocking and parrying, so then you could basically unlock some really crazy combos, and it was a lot of fun to play. The only thing is that this was not an RPG, and as much as I would love to rebuild this system in Roblox, it is way too much of a pain in the butt. But leave a comment down below if that's something that you really want to see. Another great comparison would be one of the best RPGs of all time, Dark Souls. Funny enough, there's actually a Roblox game that came out just recently that has a very similar combat system, and that game is called Ruin Slayer. So I actually had a lot of fun playing this game and testing it out to kind of see how they approached combat. I do find that the pacing is a little slower than what I would look for, but in terms of vibes, this game just really knocks it out of the park. So now that I've established what I'm looking for in a combat system, let's get to work. So the first part of making any combat system, especially a melee one, is understanding how you're going to be building out the hitboxes and the basic mechanics. So luckily for me, I actually found a hitbox system that I totally made myself, and I'm totally not stealing it from someone else. I'll leave a link in the bio if you guys want to check that out for yourselves. So now I have a hitbox that when you hit, it deals damage. The only issue is there's no animations, so it's really just a hitbox appearing and disappearing over and over again. The only thing is that I'm not an animator, so I can't be making any of these combat animations, and the toolbox honestly doesn't really have a great selection of combat animations either. Luckily for me, because of my last video, one of you guys reached out to me and said that you guys wanted to be the animator for the game. Shout out to my boy Silver, because he's been cooking up some crazy animations. So now that we have an M1, M2, and M3, we can then implement these animations directly into the game. So basically how I have it set up is that it tracks your combo, so basically 1, 2, or 3, and then it basically plays the animation that goes with that. Then when you hit your max combo, then it basically just resets the animations back to 0, and then it restarts and continues like that forever. You can basically use any weapon for this, but for this case, I'm using just a normal sword. So now it's time to implement the bane of my existence, the VFX. So specifically for sword combat, there's two ways that you can go about this. You can either put a trail directly on the weapon itself, or you can use basically VFX slashes. The VFX slashes will always give you the best result. The only issue with that is that you have to manually find the angle for each slash so that it goes according to the combo. This goes without saying, but it's an absolute pain in the butt. But because I love you guys, I did it anyways. So actually, after messing around with it for a few days, this is the final product. There's the combination of the slashes, then there's a little bit of a VFX that pops up when you swing, and then there's VFX on hit. Then I got a little bit fancy and then started messing with the FOV and then the camera as well when you're attacking. Also, a little something that I pulled from Genshin Impact is that you have a little bit of momentum while attacking. This basically just thrusts you forward with each attack, and it feels a little bit more satisfying, like as if you're pushing the enemy back. So now that I've actually built out the base sword attack, now I have to go back and rebuild the whole system, but for heavies, and then also have to build it for the light attacks. When building out a heavy attack, you want something that has a little bit slower animations and then feels a little bit heavier on hit. So that doesn't mean just increasing damage, but also increasing the screen shape. You can then usually complement this with a little bit more oomph on the sounds, and then add a little bit more damage and knockback to really make it all come together. While on the other hand, when it comes to light attacks, that you want really quick attacks that are back to back to back. So instead of example having a 3-piece combo, I basically made it a 4-piece combo, which basically makes it feel a little bit more extended. You also have a little bit faster movement speed, and then you can swing and attack a lot quicker. Now that we have our 3 different melee types in, we can now move on to the guns. For those of you that don't know, the idea for this game is a little bit more futuristic, kind of like Sword Art Online. The main inspiration for the gunplay was actually a game called Anthem, which was a game that flopped a few years back, but they had really interesting gunplay that I think could work really well on Roblox. Luckily for me, I actually built out the core gun system for another game that I had called Infection that was pretty decent, but just needed a few adjustments. Gun systems are generally a real pain to make, especially when you're using real physics. Fortunately, since I already had this system pretty much built out, it was really just plug and play and then implementing it into the new game. The only issue is that all the gun assets I have are actually just realistic guns and would not fit the game's aesthetic at all. Although I do know how to 3D model, I actually brought in an artist on this game, my boy Tommy, and he actually made some really cool gun assets that mix the theme really well. So since I already had a pre-built system and now I have the assets, it was pretty easy to just make it all come together and look pretty cool. I also built out the gun system in a pretty modular way where basically it's really easy to just plug and play different types of weapons, meaning that it's pretty easy to have like burst guns or single fire or fully automatic. It doesn't really matter, and then I can kind of just transfer them between pistols to ARs to snipers to LMGs. Like, it's very flexible and customizable using the same script. So now that we have melee and we have guns in the game, the last thing to add is the magic class. So to differentiate the magic class from the projectile class, I want the magic to be more focused on AoE or large effect areas. I would also like the magic class to kind of adopt the support role, so that basically means that because there's going to be dungeons in the game where you're going to be able to enter them with your friends, I want the magic class to kind of focus either on healing or buffing their allies, while also being able to apply status effects to bosses and monsters. This basically makes it where melee is more of like that tanky, just beat 'em up role, and then you have the ranged, which is more of like an ADS glass cannon, and then you would have the mage, which then comes in as more of a support or just AoE damage character. Just as a side note, it is really important to consider how different weapon types or classes are going to interact with each other in the game. In this case, I really want different classes and weapon types to synergize together, where you have that tanky character or you have that character that can go in frontline, but then you also have a character that can stay back and support. These are things that you must consider if you want to keep your combat feeling really fresh and exciting for every new player. For the mage character, basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to be using tweens instead of using physic projectiles. So generally speaking, this is slightly frowned upon, but I just find that it's a little bit easier to control in terms of shooting. Also, as a part of the mage class, I want you to be able to shoot multiple different projectiles at once, basically meaning that you can fan out 3 shots at once, and then you'll have different weapons that shoot a different number of projectiles but then deal different types of damage. For example, you could have just a massive fireball versus shooting 3 smaller projectiles. So once Silver cooked up some animations, I then used the VFX and got something that was looking somewhat presentable. But naturally, like anything else, there were glitches, and it ended up taking way too long to fix them. But after fighting with it for a few hours, this is the final result. And honestly, I'm pretty happy with how it looks. I do think that it feels pretty good, and then I think that by pairing this with different status effects like a burn effect or a freeze effect, it can get really fun, and I'm really excited for you guys to try it out. So after a few weeks of work, we finally have a combat system in the game where we have melee, we have ranged, and we have magic. I want you guys to leave a comment down below letting me know what you guys want to see next. The next video will likely be a movement system, because every good combat system has a great movement system that goes with it. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and feel free to join the Discord and let me know what you guys want to see. Thank you for watching, and catch you guys later.